Can the Washington Commanders pull off the upset on the Detroit Lions? And who wins the big matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and Buffalo Bills? The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts right now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The divisional round in the NFL is officially here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, and from the big primetime game of Ravens and Bills to the massive matchup between the Washington Commanders and Detroit Lions, we're going to go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day. It's crazy. We're already in the divisional round. We've gone through so much throughout the NFL season, and only a couple more weeks before we know who the Super Bowl champion will be. So 4 great games here across the divisional round, and we're going to start with a look at Saturday's NFL action. And obviously kicking us off in the early portion of Saturday is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans. Chiefs coming off of their bye week as the number 1 seed in the AFC. While the Texans, they picked up a massive win over the Los Angeles Chargers at home. So Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs and Big Sarge of Locked On Texans take you through key storylines, key matchups, and so much more.
Sarge, this is where we get into the nitty-gritty and the details of this game. There are so many different matchups and so many different things that I'm looking forward to, but the biggest thing for me going into this game is Patrick Mahomes playing the way he's played in the playoffs in the past. Yeah. If he takes care of the ball and they don't give the Texans a short field, that is the pathway to victory for me.
Yeah, one of the pathways to victory to me is if that O-line can protect CJ and give him enough time to have CJ Stroud needs to have his coming out party. And we've seen how good he was, how he had a great rookie season. Was statistically he may not have been, playing this season like everybody wanted him to be, and I know they call it the sophomore slump, but you could just see little signs of him getting better every week. And then, that last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, it was almost like that one play that everybody has been talking about where the muffed snap, and next thing you know, he picks it up, runs to the sideline, and finds Xavier Hutchinson in the middle of the field for 34.
That's a huge play.
Yeah, 34 yards, and then CJ started to use his legs a little bit more. You could almost see him get his swagger back. And so this game going up against, arguably one of the top 5 to 7 quarterbacks to ever play this game in Patrick Mahomes, going up against a great mind like Andy Reid, going up against Spagnuolo, right? Did I say that
Spagnuolo.
Right? Yeah. So going up against his brilliant defensive mind. This is a game where CJ can have his coming out party in the playoffs and show the rest of the world he's ready to take that next step. But that starts with the offensive line protecting.
When I look at this game, the second key for me is, and this is going to sound a little weird, but it's probably 6 or 7, maybe even 8 different people getting a reception in this game. And probably 3 guys with 5 targets or more, if not 4 guys with 5 targets or more. And I'm talking DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown. If you can spread the ball around and make it to where the Texans have no idea where the ball is going to go, this should be a game that the offense should be able to go out and win for you. That is key number 2 to me, is spread the ball around and get everybody involved.
Key number 2 for me is the defense having that swarm mentality and not allowing those players, those impact players. Pacheco's playing this week, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And, make sure that you watch Pacheco coming out of the backfield. Make sure you watch P. Ryan, who Coach DeMeco Ryans mentioned in his press conference on Monday about how good of a pass protector he is, how good he runs routes, how good he runs the ball. So this is a game where the Houston Texans defense is going to have to lean on the acronym that they've been using all year, that swarm mentality. Everybody has to get to the ball. Everybody has to win their one-on-ones. And if you win your one-on-ones and you're playing with that swarm mentality, then what you want to do is you don't want to allow Patrick Mahomes to have any explosive plays. You want, if he's going to dink and dunk, then you're going to make him dink and dunk, and hopefully you can make him make a mistake. I don't think that they had any turnovers and I don't think Patrick Mahomes had any turnovers in the last game that the Texans played. And so, for a team who has thrived on turning other teams over, that's exactly what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to make Patrick Mahomes make some type of mistake, and that starts with that swarm mentality.
Yeah, and on the other side for me, for the third key to victory for the Chiefs is stopping the run. And it's not necessarily because I'm extremely worried about about Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is a great back. It's more about forcing CJ Stroud to be the guy that has to beat you. I'm not saying that he can't. I'm saying that if you put all the pressure on him, it's going to be a different situation than if you allow him to have a running game and allow him to have the play action pass. So to me, it's, can you get Joe Mixon and keep him under 50, 60 yards and then put CJ Stroud in a situation where he has to rely on Nico Collins and a bunch of wide receivers that don't include Tank Dell or Stephon Diggs to try to beat this Chiefs defense.
I was to piggyback off of that is I'm going to talk about my third key is Nico Collins, and another person I'll talk about in just a second, but Nico Collins thrives in the big games, the big moments. He's a big time receiver, and he wants these type of matchups. He wants these type of games. He wants that national spotlight to show who he is. He's one of those players that still plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's one of those players who a lot of people counted out early on in his career only because he was injured and this franchise was going through a lot. And so now he's thriving on that. And so if him and CJ can get on the same page early, I think that'll be key. But it's also time. On Tuesday, DeMeco Ryans announced that rookie tight end Cade Stover is out for the season because he has to have shoulder surgery. And he's a big key of the Houston Texans offense as far as being someone that CJ can dump the ball off to in the flats. He's very good at blocking. But it's time for Dalton Schultz to step up. And one of the weaknesses I know on that Kansas City Chiefs defense is they can't hold tight ends. And if Dalton Schultz is able to be that second or third option for CJ when he is going through his progressions, if McDuffie, if I'm not mistaken, correct? If McDuffie is on Nico and is causing him some issues, then if he can't go to his second wide receiver, which probably is going to be Xavier Hutchinson or John Mechie, now you're looking for Dalton Schultz. And it's time for Dalton Schultz to be able to have that coming out party as well. It's time for them. The Houston Texans extended him this coming into this season. He was a very, very integral part of this Houston Texans offense. And so if you're going to attack that Kansas City defense at the tight end position is where you can do it. And so I'm hoping that Dalton Schultz is going to have a big game this weekend.
I don't like that because I do think that Dalton Schultz is not going to be a good matchup for this team. And if Kansas City finds a way to move on, they have even scarier tight end problems that they're going to have to deal with the next week. So, that's definitely going to be an issue they got to get figured out. So maybe this is a good week for them to find a way to stop Dalton Schultz and get ready for anything that they could be facing in the future. Sarge, it's been fun. This is I'm looking forward to this matchup. I know it's going to be a cold one. It's going to be very frigid in Kansas City. I think it's going to be under 20 degrees probably. At least that's the temperature it's supposed to feel like at kickoff. I don't know that really favors either team, but the Chiefs have played in it before. And I do think that could help them just a little bit. But any last words or any last thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I'm going to predict that the Houston Texans go in and get an emotional victory on Saturday, a 27-24 victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. Because, hey, Chris, look, at some point, we watched the dynasty in the New England Patriots, and at some point, they had to give that up, and it came to Kansas City. At some point, Kansas City is gonna have to be a changing of the guard as well. Why not it be to this young Houston Texans team who's coming in playing with emotions, 27-24.
I'm not going to give a score prediction. I'm going to say that I don't agree with your prediction. I don't think that the Chiefs are going to lose this game. And honestly, it goes just back to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Like, you take anything else away, I think it comes down to those two. Andy Reid is going to have something ready for the Texans. They've had extra time to prepare for this game. They just played him in week 16, so they already have a pretty good idea and their tendencies as to what they do. And they're going to have things that the Texans haven't seen yet, because that's what Reed does, and that's what the Chiefs do during the regular season. It's more of a warm up for the playoffs than it really is anything else. And they played that a lot like it last year, a little bit different this year considering they won as many games as they did. But I'm really looking forward to it, Sarge.
Chris is great, and Sarge is great. For more on Chris, check him out over at Locked On Chiefs. And for more on Sarge, check him out over at Locked On Texans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Maybe the most anticipated matchup of the weekend, or at least one of them, is the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions. Jaden Daniels just barely, with his Washington Commanders, made it past the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they will have the honor of going up against the other number one seed, this time in the NFC, of the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff and company hoping to advance back to the NFC Championship game. So David Harrison of Locked On Commanders and Matt Derry of Locked On Lions talk you through who's going to win this game and why.
Thursday crossover, Lions and Commanders getting ready for Saturday night's game, 8 o'clock Eastern on Fox. Yes, David, Tom Brady, Ben Johnson, and Lance Newmark all in the same building.
Yeah,
that's all I'll say. How about this? Give me some matchups. What stands out for you on the Commanders side that maybe concerns you or that you like in terms of what you're seeing on the other side?
Yeah, I think what really stands out is, again, Marshawn Lattimore versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like you want to see best go against best, and I don't think Marshawn Lattimore is going to follow Amon-Ra so much as, he's going to have his assignment. This look, it might be the X, and if Amon-Ra just happens to be the X every time they get into those looks, it's going to look like he's following him a little bit. So there's going to be a little bit of following, a little bit of not following, but I don't think he's going to be attached to his hip. So Mikey Sanders, still the rookie out of Michigan, has been a greatly impressive rookie cornerback for this team. Started off in the slot. They had to move him outside out of a necessity, and he blended into that outside position beautifully. Usually you see a rookie corner have to move positions, and you get a little concerned because that's a hard position to play your first year in the NFL already, but Mikey made it look easy, and it's been incredibly impressive. However, against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, his size did show up. It's really the first time where I noticed his size in a matchup, and it's not something I enjoyed seeing. Mikey's 5'8", but I keep telling people he plays like he's 6'2". You know what I mean? And he really does. So I need to see if that can kind of return in this game. I don't know if that was just, maybe rookie nerves, the first playoff game, or if the Buccaneers were doing something specifically. But whether it's Amon-Ra, whether it's Jameson Williams, or trying to help with, stopping the perimeter run and making a play there, need to see Mikey playing big again. And I'm confident that his confidence has never wavered, but I'm confident that we can see that version of Mikey again. And then Quan Martin, those three DBs, Quan Martin keeping the lid on defenses. The Washington Commanders are top 10 in preventing explosive passes against opponents, and I think Quan Martin has been a big reason why. Talking to Quan, he's very excited for this competition because he knows, if you want to be known as one of the best, you got to go up against the best, and you got to perform. So he's looking forward to the challenge this weekend. But I think that is going to be, as much as Jahmyr Gibbs is going to do, David Montgomery. I actually look back at the Lions' losses, and offensively, it's not like these players weren't getting numbers, right? You look back at the Lions' losses, guys are still getting numbers.
Oh yeah,
but the opposing defense is doing enough to prevent the Lions' numbers from taking over the tempo of the game. That's what the Commanders' defense has got to do, is prevent the Lions. They're going to produce, but don't let them produce so much that they just run you out of their own building.
No, I think that's all great stuff, and I think you're spot on a lot of things. I'll add in on the Lions side. I mean, the Kingsbury-Glenn matchup is interesting. Aaron Glenn has been getting, interviews for head coaching jobs again, just like Ben Johnson. Aaron has done an unbelievable job. Everybody's like, he's ready to be a head coach. He's really out-schemed the opposing team's OC, or even, Kevin O'Connell 2 weeks ago, the head coach. I mean, Aaron Glenn put on a show. And then, of course, Chris Shula kind of did what Aaron Glenn did last week. Against Minnesota for the Rams, and that worked. They attacked Sam Darnold, which we could talk about all day here. But bottom line is, I just think Cliff Kingsbury has done such a great job there that now it's all right. How does Aaron Glenn, you're right, limit what Jaden Daniels can do with the football? Linebackers are, like I said, have been better. Pass rush has been okay. It was great against the Vikings because they sent a lot of people. They blitzed a lot of people. Will they be able to do that with Daniels' escapability? Darnold has none. Daniels has a lot. So what's the chess match between those two guys? I think is interesting. And also, I want to watch Frank Ragnow and Deron Payne, and I just think that's fun to watch. I think that's one of the best centers in the game. I know Deron got hurt the other night with the finger, but I like watching him play too. I just think he's a game wrecker at times. so I love that interior of the Commanders D line. Lions interior of their O line's been good. So like that'll be a fun matchup to watch. What do the Commanders do? How do the Commanders pull this off, David? What stands out that maybe is something that they do it well, they can spring the upset here?
Yeah, so I think the three things that the Commanders have to do, and I try to do this, Matt, and I pull no punches on it. I try to tell my listeners, if they do these three things, they will win. Like I tell you, I'm guaranteeing as much as I can guarantee as a show host that they do these three things. If they green check mark all three of these things, they will win. Those three things this week. No more than 60% of the Lions' drives can produce touchdowns, and even 60% is iffy, right? Even 60%, you're kind of on the cusp, and this is where I'm putting myself at risk because the Lions could get 60%. Touchdowns on 60% of their drives, do these other two things that potentially still win because they're that good of a team. But I went back through and I looked at their losses. I looked at the close games that they had, the one-score margin of victories that the Lions had, and that pretty much seems to be the sweet spot. If you let them score, if they get say 5 scoring possessions and 3 of them are touchdowns, you're probably going to lose. But if you can get that to 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 6 or 2 out of 4, whatever it is, then you have a better shot. So that's a big one. Gibbs and Montgomery, obviously massive parts of this game. What you can't do is let them take over the game. The Washington Commanders did a very good job against Bucky Irving and Rachaad White last week against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that's a good warm-up for this group. I really like Rachaad. I really like Bucky. I think Gibbs and Montgomery are just better. The line is probably a little bit better, so at least specific in some spots. Tristan Wirfs is all-pro left tackle, but I think it's not a copy-paste. You can't just defend the Bucs run game and then copy-paste it to the Lions. But if you can prevent Gibbs and Montgomery from just fully taking over, then that'll give you a fighting chance. And then you have to get the Commanders' ground game going besides Jane Daniels. That's something that's been missing. Brian Robinson has not been the same in really over like the last month. Chris Rodriguez is the other power back. He was inactive against the Buccaneers. They've got 4 running backs on their active roster, so usually one of them is inactive. Chris was the guy who's inactive. I kind of feel like they need to have him active because if B-Rob can't get it going for whatever reason, they need to try to get Chris Rodriguez in there because what teams don't do, this, Matt, they don't run against the Lions. However, statistically, and stats, can be deceiving, the Lions are actually giving up 4.1 yards up the middle, 4 yards per run on the perimeter. Some of that might be that they're dropping back in pass sets because they're leading games. Certainly context matters in those numbers, but the bottom line is if you can get the running backs involved as a part of this game on the Commanders' offensive side, it only makes things easier for Jaden and makes them more dangerous.
On Detroit's side, number one, and you're right, by the way, Austin Eckler's in-laws live here. Little known fact. So
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Nice little homecoming for him. Oh yeah. Here's what's interesting. I think for the Lions, it's simple. I mean, this crowd has got to be revved up, and they will be. I mean, you were in this building last year for the Tampa game. I just think rattling Daniels early, let's say there's let's say Commanders get the opening kick. Let's say there's a penalty, something. You get him pushed back, and you get that crowd revved up from the beginning, and you kind of just rattle this. He's been unrattleable, if that's even a word, all year. Yeah. But, man, this is the Ford Field. This is the second round. And just get in his face a little bit. I think the way that they just completely took Sam Darnold away from Jump Street 2 weeks ago is the same type of scenario. I'm not saying they're going to hold the Commanders out of the end zone. I mean, I don't think the Lions defense is going to do that this week. But that was something else. So I think that's very, very important. Jack Fox is a big weapon for this Lions team. And I know people are going to go, punter? Yes. Yeah. Field position. Keep making the Commanders go the length of the field. This is not Dan Fouts to Wes Chandler and John Jefferson here. Weird. We're recording very early, so my mind is all over the place. But this isn't even Theismann and Alvin Garrett and Art Monk. So, make him go the length of the field. If Jack Fox can do what he does, pin the Commanders back deep to where it's 1st and 92, and they got to go, from the 8-yard line, something like that. Field position, I think, is a factor in this game. And we talked about before, I just think the Lions safeties are so good with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. If those guys are doing what they're doing, not allowing the big plays, making the Commanders really have to work in the 3rd and longs, I think it'll be a good day for Detroit. But I'm not one to sit here and tell you, I'm stunned that the spread is 10. I think that's high, but I do get it. Detroit's rested. They're at home. And, but I'm still going to take the Lions to win. I'm not going to give you a score yet, but I don't know how big you are on predictions here, but how do you see it?
I mean, Bobby Wagner is a big question mark. Like I'm really nervous to see what Dan Quinn's going to say Thursday. I anticipate even if Bobby doesn't end up playing, he's going to say, "Well, we're going to take it right back. Write down the games. I will work him out beforehand and all that stuff." But I think you have to understand why the Lions are favored. In this game, not only all the stuff that you just said, but also the Commanders are coming off of a short week. You know what I mean? They played Sunday night. Now they're playing Saturday night. They've had to congest, their schedule. They basically missed their day off, so to speak. You know what I mean? So that's a big part of this. It's a long season, all that stuff. And what's really playing in the Commanders' favor right now, I think, is having that Week 14 bye. When the schedule came out, everybody saw that Week 14 bye, third year in a row, by the way, that this franchise had a Week 14 bye. Everybody's going, "Oh, come on, that's ridiculous. You got to be kidding me." Now you're kind of appreciative that you had that Week 14 bye. Like the week off in December, you're kind of like, okay, I'm okay with that. We'll see, man. But the big thing for this game too, I mean, and Commanders fans know it, like, if the Commanders get the ball in a one-score game with less than 5 minutes left, it's just kind of what they've done. 5 wins in a row, winning on the last drive, last possession, last play of the game, and it's kind of what they do. Eventually, there's going to be a game, Matt, where they don't pull it off. Commanders fans are going to be hoping that this isn't that game, and Lions fans are going to be hoping that it is that game. But we'll see. I understand why the spread is what it is. I still think it's too big, but I understand why the spread is big. I just think that the Commanders, if you do go Lions on your picks, maybe don't take the points. Maybe just go money line on that. Or if you're a Commanders fan, definitely take those points if you're gonna put money on there. But look, you mentioned punters, man. Trust me, no Commanders fans are gonna scoff when you mention the punter because they know how valuable a punter can be. Tressway is a legend around these parts.
Be sure you check out David over at Locked On Commanders and Matt over at Locked On Lions, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, we're going to have all of Sunday's action for you. 2 more games on the docket. A lot of great football to dive into. Stay tuned. We're coming back here next on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats, like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered with over 10 million members and billions in winnings. It's clear that people are loving this platform. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having a blast this week. I'm on Lamar Jackson for more than 230 passing yards and Derrick Henry for more than 1 touchdown. It's so easy to use, and I love how fast the payouts are. I've gotten paid out in as little as 15 minutes when my picks hit. Plus, the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to my lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And the show is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes were waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Who will earn the right to go to the AFC Championship game between the Baltimore Ravens and Buffalo Bills? I'm Kevin Ostreicher. This is the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show where we take you through, with the help of our local experts, key storylines, keys to victory, and so much more here with the Divisional Round matchups, second round of the playoffs. Great Saturday matchups, but Sunday's matchups are incredible as well. We'll start off with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. That is the early game on Sunday. Jalen Hurts and company defeated the Green Bay Packers. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Rams took it to the Minnesota Vikings. So Lou DiBiase of Locked On Eagles and Travis Rogers of Locked On Rams take you through who wins the quarterback battle between Matthew Stafford and Jalen Hurts.
All right, we are wrapping up Crossover Thursday playoff style right here on Locked On Eagles and Locked On Rams. Travis, for the Rams, again, it's going to be a tough task. They're heading into Lincoln Financial Field. always a crazy atmosphere, especially in the playoffs. The weather might not be great. The Eagles are red hot, number one defense and run game heading into this matchup. If the Rams are going to pull this off, like, what are the keys to victory for McVay, Stafford, and again, in their own right, a hot Rams team?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they need to get off to a good start. I don't think this is a team that's going to be able to dig themselves a 10 or a 13 or a 14-point hole and find their way out of it. Like you just mentioned, we're at the point of the season where everybody's good. Everybody's going to be able to kind of grind these games out. They're not going to be those teams that hand you a 2-touchdown cushion and then all of a sudden find their way back into it. When the Rams are good, they're good early. When the Rams struggle, it's when it takes them a while to get going. So I think that's the first thing. And I think you mentioned it a couple of times. We haven't talked about it too much specifically, but, Sean McVay's pretty good when they go east. Sean McVay's pretty good on a short week, which technically this is because they played on Monday night. So, but the one thing that they have not been particularly good in is the cold. So how cold is it? How snowy is it? We'll see. Believe it or not, my oldest son lives in Philadelphia, so he's
there we go.
Yeah, he's been keeping me updated about the weather. It's been pretty cold of late, and I know the forecast, but we'll see. But I think getting off to a good start. If the Rams, if it's a game at halftime, if the Rams are within 3 points either way, 3 ahead, 3 behind, maybe even 4, I think they're in a pretty good spot. But if they fall behind by 10 or so, I think they're in big trouble.
Yeah, I think for the Eagles, a lot of it is self-inflicted wounds. Like, they also, Travis, cannot start slow. This was, weirdly enough, it was a crazy bit that they pulled off all year, but in quarters 2 through 4, statistically, like, they were the best offense in the league. But in the first quarter, they were the worst team in the league. So they cannot get off to a sluggish start. Do not turn the ball over. Like, don't give a team that, I think the Rams are good, but the Eagles, I do think, have a superior roster. Don't give them opportunities to take advantage and get into this football game. And I think a couple other things, like, they got to tackle better. They had 22 missed tackles against the Packers, which is unlike this defense, but you can't do that against an explosive Rams offense. And my final thing is, don't waver on your offensive strategy. Like, yes, the passing game, as I mentioned earlier, it needs to be better from an efficiency perspective. But I wouldn't suddenly say we need to prove to the world again, like they did against Pittsburgh a month ago, that we can throw the football. Yes, it needs to improve to win a championship, but I do think the run game and the defense need to be your bread and butter to get onto the NFC Championship.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think for the Rams, one of the things that I'm concerned about / hopeful for is if they can get the Eagles into third and something that isn't tush-push territory.
Yeah, right.
Can they get off the field, right? Because one of the things that I've seen happen to this team when they're struggling a little bit is they do get their opponent into those 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 5 situations, and they do a good job. The coverage is good, and all of a sudden, a quarterback that can move his feet, he's out the back.
Good point.
He picks it up, and it's a backbreaker. That's something that this kind of goes back to where we started with Jalen Hurts. And, the Rams are feeling pretty good. 9 sacks a week ago put you in a pretty good spot. But Sam Darnold and Jalen Hurts are not built the same. They're different types of guys. So Sam Darnold is where you expect him to be. Jalen Hurts may not be. So I don't know if it's Jared Verse. I don't know if it's Byron Young, but somebody's got to hold him in that pocket and let it collapse around him as opposed to letting him pop out the back door and go pick up some emergency 3rd downs, because those are backbreakers for the Rams.
And then, Travis, before we wrap up the show, how are the Rams looking on the injury front? For the Eagles, only one real injury to report, that A.J. Brown still dealing with that nagging leg injury. Dallas Goedert didn't practice today for an illness, but overall, looks like they'll have 21, I should say, with Dean out, 21 of 22 starters healthy. How about the Rams?
Yeah, they're in pretty good shape. I think Higbee's the one that you cross your fingers for, and I expect him to play. I think it's more of a how well does he play. Bobby Brown got dinged up in the Vikings game. He had to leave the game. We'll see what his availability looks like. And Akilla Witherspoon kind of took a shot in the thigh, but this is the time of year where short of being in the hospital, guys are going to play. It's just whether or not they're capable of playing at their best. And I agree with what you said a second ago. I think the Eagles, if you just kind of went man to man and said you want this guy or that guy right down the roster, you'd probably take more Eagles than you would Rams. But Thankfully, that's not how they do it. Thankfully,
it's not the way the league works.
Right. They go out there and they play. And like I said before, I'm a Sean McVay guy, and I'll always take my chances with him. And Matthew Stafford's been through a lot of this stuff. He's been really good for the Rams in these moments. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Travis has you covered with all things Rams over at Locked On Rams, and Louis has you covered with all things Eagles over at Locked On Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, only 4 games on the docket, but 4 good ones. The Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, 2 of the AFC and honestly NFL powerhouses facing off in Buffalo. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, 2 high-powered offenses. This game is going to be a great one. So Joe Marino of Locked On Bills and me, Kevin Ostreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens, take you through everything you need to know for the matchup.
Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Kevin Ostreicher, host of Locked On Ravens, getting you ready for the divisional round Sunday night game between the Bills, Ravens, Highmark Stadium. Winner goes to the AFC Championship game and is 1 win away from the Super Bowl. Kevin, if Baltimore is going to go into Highmark Stadium and get this win, what are the keys to victory?
I think one, being able to convert at a high level for the Ravens. This has been a team that when you look at their conversion rates, and this has been a storyline throughout the entire season for them, they're one of the best third down offenses in the league and the best red zone offense. They converted nearly 75% of their red zone opportunities when it comes down to that. So in games like this, and I expect this one to be close, probably a little more high scoring than the Pittsburgh game. And, obviously both the Ravens and Bills were able to put it to the Steelers and Broncos defenses, respectively. I just feel like red zone opportunities are going to be so huge. And that, honestly, the defensive side of the ball too. The Ravens on the defensive side of the ball, red zone wise, they've been okay. They're 12th. And when you look at Buffalo's red zone percentage on offense, they're right behind Baltimore. They're number 2. So these are 2 high-powered red zone offenses, and it might just come down to which team is able to tighten up inside the 20 and force the opposing offense to kick field goals. With 2 field goal kickers I know, Joe, who have had some up and downs this season. Justin Tucker, luckily for Baltimore side of things, has turned it around since the bye week, but obviously it was a very rocky stretch for him before. So if it comes down to a final kick, whichever fan base it is, I'm sure it's going to be sweating thinking about what's going to happen here because of all the volatility we've seen from both those guys this year. Secondly, the Ravens have had an issue with penalties all season. It's no secret. They've ranked in the bottom 5, bottom 2, worst in the league, and a lot of that. And obviously, it's kind of forced the Baltimore fan base to look at who's going to be reffing each game and seeing tendencies. And I know the crew coming to Buffalo, I think offensive holding is the most called penalty of that crew. And it's just going to depend on execution, where the Ravens have had multiple times. We talked about stopping the run for Buffalo and Derrick Henry. The Ravens will get an 8-yard run, and then they'll be holding on an offensive lineman, and instead of 2nd and 2, you're in 1st and 20, and that just kills your drives. And the Ravens have lost multiple games this season that way. They've been better recently, but it's still not perfect. And then finally, I just think if I'm given like a key player in this game, Brandon Stevens is one that I think is going to be a huge matchup for Buffalo in terms of, we talked about guys like Amari Cooper, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins. The Ravens have a lot of great players on that secondary, Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, and obviously Kyle Hamilton. But Brandon Stevens, his weakness is he doesn't turn his head around for the ball. And if you're a receiver, especially if the Ravens do invite Josh Allen to throw that ball deep and they're able to convert on some of those deep shots, if a receiver shows late hands, obviously as a receiver, you're looking for cues to turn your head around for the ball. And if Brandon Stevens doesn't get that, they're going to let up a lot of deep completion. So I think limiting the deep passing game and forcing turnovers. This could come down to just a turnover battle. Who ends up getting more turnovers? Who ends up holding the ball last? If whichever team makes the least mistakes goes on to the AFC Championship game, that wouldn't shock me whatsoever.
Yeah, it's funny how often games are lost more than they are won, especially in the postseason. I will say this, man. You mentioned the kickers. If Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen for a date in the AFC Championship game comes down to Tyler Bass and Justin Tucker, something has gone wrong. Like, nobody wants that. That is not why a single person is turning on this game, and they're not turning it on to watch referees either. So let's keep the kickers and the refs out of this thing, because it's annoying. We want the players to decide what's going on. Kevin, it's interesting you start with red zone because I also start with red zone, and you mentioned 1 and 2, Ravens 1, Bills 2 in red zone touchdown percentage. Ravens defense is 12th. I think the Bills are 16th in red zone defense. And I think that's going to be really, really critical, particularly for the Bills on defense. And I want to go back to the last 4 matchups. The 2024 Week 4 win, the Ravens 4 for 4 scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Go back to the 2022 game. The Bills win that one. Baltimore goes 2 for 4. Lamar has a red zone turnover. Go back to the 2020 playoff win. The Ravens go 0 for 3 in the red zone. There's a big red zone turnover, the Taron Johnson pick 6. Go back to the 2019 win that Ravens had over Buffalo. They go 2 for 3 in the red zone. There's been a direct correlation between the team that wins. They're 2-2 over the last 4. The team that's better in the red zone wins these games. You need touchdowns, not field goals when you're on offense. You need field goals, not touchdowns when you're on defense. I think that's critical, and it's interesting that we both went there first. Number 2 is find ways to get the Ravens offense out of rhythm. I don't have that answer, man. You know, like you talk about getting quick pressure. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. Can Ed Oliver win quick? Can you have some A-gap blitzes that create some confusion and you have a breakthrough and you got a free runner at Lamar or Derrick Henry? However you can get them out of rhythm, it's probably some of that. It's probably an all of the above approach, right? It's not like, hey, do this every single play. I think it's do lots of things at the right times. And I think that's going to be important. What can you do to get them out of rhythm? Because if you don't, dude, you've watched the Ravens. We've all watched the Ravens. It's like, how do you deal with it? Yeah. So I think it's an all of the above approach, and whatever it is, get them out of rhythm. And then number 3, another very similar talking point. I think for the Bills, it's about working matchups on offense. And I look at 2 in particular, Brandon Stevens. I think everybody knows, like, that's the player you go after for Baltimore. And so if you have chances with Cooper or Coleman or Hollins, take them. You know, I think not only is there a ball skills issue with Brandon Stevens, who's still kind of new to playing corner, if I'm not mistaken, at SMU. Yes. He's like a converted player. But, you know, a guy that doesn't necessarily – there's going to be size advantages that the Bills can have there as well. And I think there's that other linebacker spot as well, where it's Roquan, and then it's like Malik Harrison, Chris Gordon. Yep. Right, so they've kind of moved away. The Trenton Simpson thing is not working for now. How do you take some chances there? I mean, the Ravens have given up the fourth most receiving yards to running backs this year, the 9th most yards to tight end. So how do you get your guys in positions to take advantage of maybe some areas that Baltimore's had some vulnerability on defense? So it's winning red zone, find ways to get Baltimore out of rhythm offensively, and then what matchups can you attack that's going to keep your offense moving and scoring points?
And these are 2 very high-powered teams. And I think that when you talk about each particular matchup, there are ways that I feel like both teams match up well with each other. But I think it's going to be which team exploits the weaknesses better and say, we're just going to go to this over and over and over. Because, for example, the Ravens against the Steelers, one, didn't get up for the game. I expect Buffalo to be much more competitive than Pittsburgh was.
Sure.
Much more. But I think that the Ravens, there was a lot of conversation about, okay, you know, they barely ran in the AFC Championship game. You need to lean into your strength. They ran 50 times because it was working. They exploited that Steelers weakness, and they never let it go the entire game. So I think that for me, if the Ravens or Bills do that, and they, you know, don't get too cute, you stick to what you know, you stick to who you are, that could be the difference in a win or loss. For more on the Bills, check Joe out over at Locked On Bills. And for more on the Ravens, you can check me out over at Locked On Ravens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. A great week of NFL action on the docket here with these 4 matchups. And of course, the championship round is not far away. So thank you for tuning in and listening to the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. And we'll see you right back here soon on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show.